Brian Grimes, your real estate mentor, back with another action-packed session. We're going to be talking about home renovations today. How do you build rehab budgets? A lot of you guys have this question, so make sure you stick around to the end. We're going to drop a lot of game that you're really not going to hear anywhere. You're not going to hear it on YouTube University, we'll call it. So stick around to the end. Ask any questions. Drop them in the comment section. Drop them in the chat. We'll even answer them after the live. And if you're new to the channel, like, comment, subscribe. Leave the comment that says I subscribe. For everyone who leaves that comment, I'm going to send you instant access to our free real estate training. It's going to show you how to acquire properties for pennies on the dollar all across the country. You don't want to miss out on that free offer. So let's get into it. We have a lot to unpack in this session. So I'm expecting, a decent amount of questions from you guys, because I get this so much. As I'm building up your real estate education, it all kind of comes back to construction, right? Because we're real estate investors. As a real estate investor, you have to know construction. And this is the part that has kind of like caught me up about some of the people out there that teach real estate. They'll try to teach people how to invest in real estate. Like, oh, you want to do Airbnb, or you want to wholesale, you want to do tax search, tax liens, and do all these different types of investing, especially wholesaling, right? And they don't teach you construction. They don't teach you the cost of a renovation, how that full gut process goes, how all the different moving pieces and parts, the architects, the engineers, the permit expediters, they don't teach that part of the game, and it makes absolutely no sense. You have to think about it like, if you wanted to invest in cars, right? You want it to be like just flipping cars. You want to know what a mechanic knows. You want to know how much cars cost to put back together, how long it takes to put them back together, the materials, the process, where those materials can be sourced. You need to know all of that information in order to be a good car investor, right? You need to know almost what a mechanic knows. So in order to be a good real estate investor, to really have that X-ray vision, you need to know to a degree what a GC knows. Not everything that a GC knows, but critical mass, 51% at least. Once you hit critical mass, you can accelerate and you can get to the rest over the course of time. But you don't need it all at once to be successful. But you have to learn construction. You are not going to be successful at wholesaling if you don't understand the cost of construction. You are not going to be successful at flipping, at any of these different strategies. And nobody talks about construction because most people don't really renovate houses. They're not really out doing this stuff. So there's a lot to talk about. There's just a lot to unpack here. But that's the reason why we're, diving in on this session today. Guys, leave your questions in the chat section. We'll be addressing them kind of live as we roll through here. I have a guide that I'm going to walk us through. It's very thorough, and I dropped a resource to this guide in the description. So you can click that link in the description. Don't skip past those other links to tap into the free training, to join the Facebook group where you can learn, even more. But definitely tap into this link and keep it handy, because there's a lot of good information in this resource that we're going to go through. But before we get into that, let's talk about the tough part. The tough part, and what we can't necessarily do today, but this information is in the 100 Keys Masterclass. This information is kind of part of what we do, is inspecting properties. Going out and looking at properties, taking that action to put your hands on properties, put your boots on the ground per se. This is what's going to build your education in terms of understanding what you're seeing. You need to go out and see, a lot of you that are watching this, that are thinking about, how can I take action? How can I get a deal? How can I get started? Have you seen 20 properties yet? Ask yourself that question. Have you seen 20 properties yet? Have you been boots on the ground in 20 rehab projects, potential projects yet? Not even that you have to buy them and close on them, but have you gone out, got with a realtor, and stood your feet on the ground in some properties? If you're not doing that, you're missing out on a lot of learning. You're missing out on a ton, because here's what happens with real estate. When you're first getting started, you can learn everything in the world that you could, want to learn about real estate, but you're still going to have on blinders. When you walk in that property for the first time, you're going to be excited, fired up, but you're not going to be able to see what's going on. You're going to look at the walls, you're going to look around, trying to look for some structural issues, but you don't really have the education yet, because you haven't stood enough properties to see the difference between one and the other. So you're missing out on that vision. So if I walk in a property, me and you in the same property, I can probably see 15 to 20x more issues than you can see. And this is what allows me to build a rehab budget. By the way, this is why I'm talking about it, because I can show you, and we're going to get into the weeds of like renovation costs and how to break it down and the value of it. But if we both walk into the same property and you can't see the issues, how could you budget for the issues? How do you know the difference between a cosmetic and a full gut renovation? Because this is what really breaks investors that are going out and trying to do it themselves. They're trying to do it on their own because you can't see yet. So how could you get that done? How can you build a proper budget? So we'll talk about some of that, but that's one of the tough parts. Seeing that structure, understanding how to budget correctly. Are you doing a low end? Are you doing a high end? Are you factoring in the little things like the concrete's broken up in front of the house headed to the property? Or are you just focused on the property? You have to account for as much as possible. Let's get into the weeds a little bit, guys. Guys, if you're new to the channel, like, comment, subscribe. Share this with somebody who could get value out of just understanding more about the construction process and how to build houses. So we're going to go through some of these sections, and I'll agree or disagree with some of these things, but here's the average cost, according to homeguide.com, of some of these renovations. And we'll call this like a 1,200 square foot house, like a starter home, 3-bed, 1-bath. If you're doing a low end and just an interior, and you're just doing cosmetic work like painting, landscaping, trim, molding, floor, stock cabinets, and inexpensive appliances and countertops. That would be like wooden countertops, not your granite, not your, long-term countertops or your high-end countertops. You're going to drop, $15,000 on the low end to $40,000. And I found that number is relatively true. If you're going into a property and you're just trying to turn this thing around and get it what I would call like rent ready, on your typical starter home, you can do that for about $40,000. Go in, paint, TLC the flooring, put down some cheap floor, put down some, $1.50 laminate flooring throughout. It's going to make it look really nice. It's not going to have the longest lifespan, but if it's a rental, it is what it is. You want to kind of build your rental product for the next 5 years, we'll call it, because even high-end materials in a property can get ruined, by a tenant. So you want to go for durability, but if you're just going to turn around this product and maybe flip it later, I'm going to rent it now, I'll flip it later when the market turns. Go with a cosmetic, a cheaper, lower grade rehab. Don't blow your budget because you're going to be really ticked when the wrong tenant moves into your property and just tears it apart, which is going to happen until you get better at screening tenants. A way to screen tenants in a way, side note, in a way where they won't tear up your property is to inspect the property that they're living in currently before they move into your property. Most tenants are in transition. Not a lot of people, some people are moving like out of their home, but a lot of people are moving from one rental property to the next. So you can do a pop-up inspection and just say, hey, we're in the area. It's part of our property management company's process to come and check out where you're living now. Can we swing by 5-10 minutes? Swing by, shoot a video, or have your boots on the ground, shoot a video. However they're living in their current property is how they're going to live at yours. So if you show up, and this is kind of a pop-up inspection, and everything's filthy, it's just a wreck, that's how your property is going to be. But if you could go in there and eat off the floor, that's how your property is going to be. So that's the easiest indicator of how somebody's going to take care of your stuff. It's very easy to check, but not a lot of people will go the extra mile to just do that. So definitely keep that in mind. That's like a pro tip that a lot of people don't use, but you want to keep that in mind. For mid-range, this is if you're maybe trying to just boost up the ARV a bit. Like you're trying to do a cash out refinance, or you're trying to get a refi so you can do a full burst strategy deal. You're probably looking at more of like a mid-grade where you want to use decent light fixtures. You want to TLC the siding. Some of this stuff you want to do anyway, especially on your rental products. You want to make sure the property is essentially water sealed. You want to get the exterior right. You don't want to skimp out there. And then you have your high end, which could go, upwards of 200,000, even on a smaller property. Let's talk about kind of where you're spending your money from a dollar per square foot perspective. If you're doing a whole house on a just a remodel. This is just like a cosmetic interior remodel. You're going to be dropping somewhere between $15 to $60 per square foot. 15 is extremely low. I've almost never seen 15. And if you're, one thing to keep in mind with rehab costs, even as you're building the budget, you're going to get better and better at this over the course of time. You want to know how to build a budget gradually and in general when you're first getting started, so you don't get burned. So you know generally what things cost. And if you don't know, you're in 100 Keys, you like masterclass. If somebody sends you, a rehab proposal, just send it to me. I'll review it, look it over, give you feedback, and we'll kind of let you know if this is like a crazy rehab budget or not. But when you're just getting started, you don't want to go with the cheapest guy. This is how a lot of people will get burned by GCs. They go with the cheap guy. He comes in at $15 a square foot, and it's just not realistic at all. And before you know it, this guy ran off with all your money. So the cheapest bid is not the good bid. The realistic bid is the good bid. And by a quality contractor, somebody who you've seen their work before. And don't just take pictures, because pictures, anybody can get a picture and send it to you. Go see their work. Go see their crew. You have no idea how many guys are just like faking. Oh, this is my project. This is my work. It's not their work. It's their cousin's work. The full gut is clearly much more. I'm seeing right now, because costs have been kind of through the roof on materials, all these supply shocks. We've had things like lumber go up, hundreds of percent and back down again. I've been seeing it closer to like somewhere between $90 to $120 per square foot in major cities. Philly, Baltimore, just major cities. And we'll get into location a little bit later. But we have a price per square foot breakout from a location standpoint. But you're dropping a lot of money in what they call the wet areas, the kitchens and bathrooms. So even if you go into a building and you want to do a cosmetic renovation, so you're like, all right, I'm just going to TLC and do XYZ, but the kitchens and the bathrooms are a wreck, and you're going to flip those around. It's a smaller footprint in terms of square footage, so it's not going to break the bank. But that is where you're spending the most money, is the kitchens and the bathrooms, the wet areas. That's where the appliances are. Think about your kitchen. You have almost $3,000 worth of appliances if you're really decking out this kitchen. The dishwasher, the garbage disposal, the microwave, the stove, the fridge. Like, you're really loading up just on appliances in that one room. When you go into the bathroom, if you're going to do a full remodel, sink, toilet, vanity, medicine cabinet, then you're tiling it floor to ceiling. And then there's a labor cost in there. So you're actually spending the majority of your money in certain rooms. This is why it makes sense as you're building your budget or you're evaluating a project to go and add an extra bedroom if you can. Because adding an extra bedroom is a marginal extra cost. I mean, as we're seeing here, the price per square foot, even on the high end, for doing things like adding a cosmetic bedroom, putting up some walls, putting in some wiring, something a little bit more cosmetic, is way less than the cost per square foot on the high end of a kitchen and bathroom. So you don't necessarily want to run into some of these projects and add, like, oh, I'm going to add more bathrooms. Like, you can, but you're not necessarily going to get more money. So it doesn't make as much sense, in my opinion. Unless you get to a certain size. If you get to 5 bedrooms, you want to add another bathroom, because that's a lot of people in terms of a footprint to be burning through one bathroom. 5 beds, that's like a lot of kids, typically somebody who's going to rent that type of property. But on a 4-bed or less, you can typically just keep 1 bathroom and save the money. Put that money somewhere else. Put that money in the roof. Put that money on the exterior. Make sure your property is watertight. Let's keep flowing through this thing. I want to get to some other sections. Not the cost by bedroom. Let's get into this. This is actually really good. So here's a home renovation breakout by property type. So depending on the house that you're working on, there's going to be different costs. If you're working on a row home, and this is for like a cosmetic renovation, You can be at like $25 to $75 per square foot on average if you're just rocking with like a single family. Multifamilies can become more expensive. Sometimes you need sprinklers. Sometimes you need different types of materials like fire rated sheetrock, thicker drywall that's more expensive, that's heavier, that's more difficult to put up. So they're just things that you need to factor in. But if you're doing an apartment, it can be really cheap, or a condo. If you're doing a Victorian or some of these different freestanding properties, you can lose a lot of money just on the exterior. I've done a few freestanding houses and I just did not like it at all. Compared to a row home where there's a house on the left and right, if you think about a row home, there's just the front and back of the house in terms of like exposure, because the sides are enclosed by the other properties and you have a flat roof. So your spend, if you wanted to TLC the entire exterior, let's do all the brickwork, point all the bricks, paint, TLC, cap the windows, you're still not going to drop anywhere near, let's say maybe drop 15,000 on that. You're not going to drop anywhere near what you would drop on a freestanding. On a freestanding, I have to wrap the whole house in siding. I have to do the whole roof, and it's not a flat roof now. Now it's a shingle roof. You're going to drop 40,000 on the exterior of the freestanding before you put any money into the interior. And putting money into the interior is where the real value is. To me, that's where the value is, especially if you're doing this to build rental properties. If you're going to build rentals, you want all your money going into the interior, or as much as possible. The exterior is just about aesthetics and being watertight. You don't want water coming in to your building, because water rots out your joists, it rots out your property, it creates mold. That's going to be what destroys your property. So keeping the water out is key. After that, every dime should go on the interior. So I try to shy away from a budgeting standpoint from properties that need a lot of exterior work. If I'm going to drop 40, 50 grand on the outside, it's just like, well, what's the point of this? Because I'm not getting any value. I'm not getting extra rental income because the roof's nice necessarily, or because the siding is nice. That's just protecting the property for the long haul. Historical is worth touching on. There are historical properties. So this is kind of getting more into the zoning code, but there are properties that are in historic districts. And when a property falls in one of these districts, you can't change the materials on the outside. And sometimes there'll even be internal materials that you can't change. But things like windows, doors, you actually have to keep old school windows and doors. And this can become extremely expensive if you have to replace these windows. Let's say they're not functional. So now you have to go to these specialty companies that all they do is build historic windows up to that code. So they're specialized in it. They're going to charge you 4 to 5x the cost that it costs them to build this stuff. So you're now going from $250, $300 per window to $1,000, $1,200 per window. And I mean, some of these properties have 20 windows. So you can get absolutely destroyed if you don't understand that you're in a historic district. This is something you would want your architect looking into, maybe your zoning attorney who understands these regulations looking into, until you become better versed in it. All of this information, by the way, is typically publicly available. The zoning code for any municipality, you can typically just pull up, just Google it, wherever you're investing, and read it. There's no specialized skill you need for this stuff. You just need to read it. If you read it, you'll have maybe 70% of the knowledge of your architect in terms of generally what you can do within an area. It's not overly complicated, but most people won't take that time to read a 70-page zoning guide because it's dense. It's like reading the encyclopedia, unless you really love real estate. David said where to download the slides. Just click the link in the description. There's a bunch of links in the description. Some you can tap into the Facebook group, our private Facebook group. You can tap into some of the free trainings we have for you. You can tap into the Instagram, DM me questions, things like that. And then we have the resources section. You can tap into the resources. So just check the description, and you can tap in there and kind of pull this up. I just want to get through a few quick questions, and then we'll keep going through this. Apparently, beginning today, people with higher credit scores may pay more in upfront fees. Is this true? Do you have an overview? Yeah, I mean, it's true. I mean, it's true. They came out with this rule. This is kind of part of the administration's rule right now. People with better credit scores are kind of getting pinched and subsidizing people with lower credit scores. It kind of is what it is. I think it will lead to kind of riskier bets by underwriters because they know that, you know, the risk is offset by people with better credit scores. So it truly is what it is. I mean, it's not great if you have a really good credit score. I mean, you're just going to pay a little bit more. So it's not ideal. I don't really know what to say outside of that about it. It's just something we'll have to deal with. I think depending on how the election goes, whoever gets in office next, or maybe it's still Biden, if somebody else gets in, they'll probably scrap it if they don't like it, or if people don't like it, they'll just scrap it. I mean, I don't think that this is something that needs to stick around, but it's here now. Guys, drop your questions in the chat in the comment section, and we'll just keep rolling through your questions, and then I'll get back into some of this budget building. And I have another resource for you guys, so make sure you stick around. Just a teaser to stick around to the end, because I have like a full rehab budget for you guys. I need to move my location. Yeah, I have like a full rehab budget for you guys that you guys can kind of play with, but we'll get into that a little bit later. Let me just bang through a few more questions. Is there a square foot requirement for bedroom size and or kitchen? Yeah, your bedroom typically needs to be at a minimum in most municipalities 70 square feet. So that's 7 by 10, but that's like almost like a jail cell. So it's very small, 70 square feet. You'll see a lot of these rooms that are that size or even smaller in places like New York, especially in Brooklyn. People are like, oh, we're selling a two bed and a den. It's pretty much a 3 bed, and you get in there and it's like you can barely fit, a bed in there. Like you can barely fit a twin size bed in some of these rooms. But 70 square feet is the minimum. The bathroom has to be 5 by 7 at a minimum, typically. So there are some minimums. Not that you won't run into a scenario where maybe this house was built 50 years ago, 60 years ago, and they'll have some knock-around bathroom that is way smaller than that. That's barely should be qualified as a bathroom. So you're going to see a lot of stuff, but that's kind of the minimums there. The Mad Millionaire, the best info. This is definitely some of the best info on YouTube, man. You're not going to find real estate education out here. There's just a lot of nonsense. How can I begin to wholesale? I'm in New York. One, just tap into the mentorship program. I mean, we'll show you how to get into the biz. I mean, wholesaling is more of a byproduct of just getting in front of motivated sellers. One is learning enough information to be able to make people very comfortable and to put them in a position where you can solve their problems. So wholesaling is solving problems, or creative financing is more solving problems. Wholesaling is kind of being a middleman, but there's still a problem that's being solved there, which is I'm motivated to sell. I need some cash. I need to get out of this deal, and I need somebody to come move it for me in as is condition. And I don't want to pay a realtor, and I don't want to pay transfer taxes. So it's coming in and structuring a deal where somebody else can make money or get out of a bad situation. So you have to learn how to do deal structuring. You don't really, like, when people think about, I need to learn how to wholesale, they look at it as like, I just need to learn the whole, like, just this business. Like, I just want to go out and do X, Y, Z. It's really something you have to break down into components. You have to learn deal structuring. You have to learn creative financing so that you have more opportunities. You have to learn marketing. So it's not really wholesaling, it's marketing you need to learn. How do I get in front of motivated people? Where are they? How do I get in front of them at a low enough cost to produce a profit. And then when you actually get in front of somebody who's motivated, sales skills, how to close, how to negotiate, how to structure, how to solve problems, how to sit on the same side of the table as somebody versus across the table from them. So there's a lot of different skill sets that you need to tap into. But the most important one is just getting in front of motivated people. Because even if you suck at everything else, if you can get in front of enough motivated people, you're going to get a deal. Because somebody's motivation is going to be high enough where you can step in and just say, look, I can get this done, and they're going to trust it and go with you. And if you can get that property moved, you're going to make the commission. But I would say the market is getting tougher and tougher. People have unique issues today, and you need to learn creative financing. You need to learn subject to lease purchase options, land contracts, wraparound mortgages. You need to learn like everything, the whole spectrum of creative financing and wholesaling. Then, regardless of whoever you talk to, your hit rate is going to be a lot higher because you can solve more problems. Therefore, you can make more money. And that's in anything, guys. If you want to make more money, learn how to solve more problems or bigger problems for other people, and you'll make more money. So that's what I would focus on, is the knowledge and just getting tapped in to the right marketing campaign to get in front of people. We have somebody in the VIP mentorship course. We were just talking earlier today. We just did a whole bandit sign campaign. People think bandit signs don't work. Guerrilla marketing always works. If bandit signs didn't work, you wouldn't be driving to work and see, oh, we buy houses as is, all cash, and a phone number. You wouldn't see it. People wouldn't waste the time. So they still work. We just launched a bandit sign campaign. Calls are coming in, and good deals. Burnout landlords. Exactly who you want to talk to. Hey, I got a duplex. I'm burnout. I'm looking to move this thing. So a lot of these strategies work, but people just don't have the recipe for how to go and get that campaign launched. But we launched this campaign in a week and took the action steps, and it's happening. And this guy's 20 years old, young guy, but aggressive with vision. He'll be retired by 25. As crazy as that sounds, but he's taking the action, so it's definitely going to connect. It is what it is. But that landed, just bandit signs landed, or led to a $350,000, duplex, motivated seller, something that could be structured for maybe like a subject to, maybe a lease purchase option. You just have to continue the conversations and see where that deal goes. But these things are happening right now from, people are doing this all across the country. There's no reason why you can't. You can definitely tap in. Can you talk about additions to raise value or converting a garage? Thanks. So additions can raise a lot of value. I mean, additions are about thinking outside of the box. When you're trying to add value as a developer, you have to be able to outthink your competition. That's where the money is. So it goes back to me standing in a house and you standing in a house, or me analyzing a deal from the computer versus you. So adding things like an addition, like there are deals I'm working on right now where we're blowing the roof off, building up a level, building back into the property, blowing the back of the house off, building back, relaying a new foundation. Doing some of these things unlocks value because the costs are typically a fraction of the value. So you want to look into things like, if you buy a property, it has an attic, and you can go in and refinish that attic and make that livable space, even an office space. Things like this usually add about a 70% return on investment. So you spent $10,000 on it, it'll boost your ARV by $17,000 on average. So there are things like that, like an addition, converting a garage, where there's going to be some cost. Converting a garage is something you have to kind of go through zoning for in some areas. You may have to go through a zoning process. You may have to sit in front of a zoning board to get that approved. You can't always convert legally a garage into livable space without going through that zoning process. So that is something you'd have to look into. Refinishing your attic, you can typically do that. Um, Additions, blowing off the roof, building up a level, that's something that you can do by right. So you don't have to necessarily sit in front of the zoning board. You just need to file the right building plans for things like that. So when adding value, you do have to think about what else is required. Because if you have to go through a zoning board, typically you will need a zoning attorney. And then what does that cost? That's 10, 15,000. You can get that done as cheap as 4 or 5,000. But that guy's not going to be like a real attorney. He's just going to be a guy who might have some connections and kind of knows the biz and can get it done and has done it before. But you want to think about these things when you're trying to add value, because you don't want to get into a situation where you're running around, you're adding value, then you get popped by license and inspection, and that value is kind of stripped away. They tell you to demolish it. It wasn't done right. You have to do these things by the book. On top of additions, there's also conversions. So converting from single to multifamily, which you can do by right, depending on the zoning of the land, beneath the property. Or if the property has a variance or some of these things, you might be able to execute on a variance. So you just want to think outside of the box, but you have to think about, what these things cost. You never want to spend money frivolously in this game. You don't want to spend money into an addition and then you don't even get a benefit on the top. So this one project I'm working on where we're blowing the roof off, it takes the ARV from 350,000 to 575,000. The cost to blow off the roof, the extra cost to blow off the roof, build up the level, and finish the level is probably an extra 30,000 to 35,000. So to do that work and finish the property versus not do it, it doesn't make any sense, because the return is multiples, several X's, 3, 4, 5X the cost. So you definitely want to do that to unlock value. So you just want to think in those terms. What can I do to raise the value, to unlock more value? And you want to just keep your cost per square foot, under wrap. You just want to keep that under wrap. Any more questions out there? I'm not sure if we have any other questions out there, and then we'll just kind of keep flowing. And I want you guys to just think about when you're tracking these budgets, when you're building these budgets out and kind of tracking this stuff, you just want to make sure you're factoring in everything as much as you can, because there are a lot of costs that goes into these things that they're not necessarily purely related to the cost of construction, like your permits, your plans, getting an architect. Your architect could run you anywhere from, I've seen, well, look, there's street architects, and these are kind of guys who just know how to draw plans. So they'll talk about, maybe they'll charge you $500 to $1,000 per deal just to do the plans. And then you'll have guys who come in, and if they're a legitimate architect, they're going to charge you maybe anywhere from $5,000 to $15,000 to do plans, especially if you're getting more into that multifamily spectrum. So these are things you want to think about and truly factor in, or you're going to burn yourself out on costs. And a lot of people, they don't get burnt out on the deal necessarily. Where they get burnt out in terms of their budget is they're working on these projects and they're not factoring in all these little costs, like the cost of the architect, the engineer, like the cost of your mortgage interest, your mortgage insurance, some of your carrying costs, your taxes, your water bills, just factoring in the actual cost of the total scope of the project. What does it cost to get the full project done? That's the most important thing, is catching all the little money that is moving. When I first started in this business, it was kind of like a lot of us, and some of you guys are probably still doing this if you're working on projects, trying to do it yourself. You're out there and you're looking at the big picture. So you're like, hey, I'm going to buy it for $50K. I'm going to put 50 grand into it. and then I'll refinance out of it and pull XYZ money out, or I'll flip the house. And if you don't factor in that little money, you're going to get burned. You're going to get burned every time, because the little money is actually, what is going to keep you in the deal. It's going to keep you in the game. It's going to keep you kind of floating. And, just staying where you need to be in terms of your cash position. So factoring in the little money is very important when you're getting started. Most people don't start factoring in the little money until deals like 10 through 20, as they start to learn of the the negative impact of it. So it's just something you guys always want to keep in mind, and keep just keep it factored in terms of your budgeting. Let me pop us back up. Any other questions out there before we get back into this thing? I want to get into some of the actual budget. But I just need to log back in here. I just need to log back in and get us popped up. So any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat, and we'll keep flowing once I get this screen share back up. Here we go. Construction budget 123 Main Street. So let's walk through a quick construction budget. Let me pop this up here. So I want to go to a different view so you guys can see more. So when we're going through a budget, like I said, we want to factor in some of these smaller costs. So you're always going to start off with general requirements, your administrative requirements, your engineer, some of your financing fees, your legal fees. And that could be if you're dealing with the zoning attorney, or maybe you have a squatter, you need to get somebody out of the house. Like there's a lot of stuff that pops up there. Your permit costs can vary depending on where you're at. Sometimes they're very cheap in some municipalities. Sometimes it's extremely expensive. Plan review, your architects and your MEPs. These are like your plumbing, your HVAC, and your electric plans. And sometimes you don't need all these extra plans. So if you're working on like a single family property, you may not need standoff or standalone plans for your plumbing, electric, or your HVAC. But if you're doing multifamily, you do. So you have to understand some of these wrinkles, or you're going to get into a deal and you're like, oh, I thought the permits were going to be 4,000 and they're like 10, because there are specialty companies that do some of this other work. Surveys, that's more for like a ground up deal. But these are some of the things you want to factor in. And as you're factoring in terms of like the overarching budget, there's always materials. You can work in terms of paying somebody by like an hour rate or a daily rate. And you can break that down into how long you want them to work a day. So I have guys with crews that, the crews work 10-hour days. Like that's what they do. And then you'll have a guy with crews that work, some of these guys are like 6 hours a day. Like they're barely giving you any work, and they're taking an 1.5 hour lunch break. So the cost is not always the same by the day. So you could have those two guys come in and say, our guys are $200 a day. But if one crew is giving you 10 hours with a 30-minute lunch break and they're really cranking, and the other's giving you 6 hours with an 1.5 hour, lunch break, you're going to see the production is not making sense. So the rates need to reflect actually how long they're working in a day. It's almost better to break it down hourly and then pin them to it. So it's like, all right, you want 200 a day, that's $20 an hour. Then if they start pulling up short, 5 hour, 6 hour days, at least you're not bleeding out in terms of costs. But you can also just bid things out and just flat rate everything, which can be a way to go. Flat rating, I would say, if you're going to do by the hour or by the day work, it can make a lot of sense on bigger projects, because bigger projects you can swarm. And if you execute perfectly, you can save a lot of money, especially at high volume. So as you're scaling a business, if you're doing 5-6 deals at once, you might want an in-house team that you can direct. and you can save money in terms of volume as at the right price points. And a lot of that is broken out in the 100 Keys Masterclass. For those who are in the VIP mentorship program, just tap into the construction section. But if you're working on these smaller projects, like a cosmetic renovation, we just want to get rent ready and get this thing Section 8'd, it's good to bid those out. Bid those out for 25, 35,000. Have a crew come in, just knock everything out for a flat rate. Because you're keeping it cosmetic, you're not really doing anything structural. You're not necessarily pulling permits or doing all these things on a cosmetic renovation. So having that crew and kind of passing off that risk can make sense, because that's really the trade-off that you're doing. If you're paying by the day or by the hour, you're embracing the risk and then managing the project. If you're doing this on a bid out, you're kind of passing off the risk and saying, well, if it takes you longer, then you just don't make as much money as a contractor. There are pros and cons to both, and there are a lot of risks to bidding out in terms of a lack of control. So then, especially if you're in one of these traditional situations where somebody comes and bids out a project and then they're asking for 25%, 30% up front, and you give it to them, now they're ahead of the money constantly. They're controlling the money, and the person who's controlling the money is in control. They're in charge. You never want to be in that position where you're the owner, but you're not in control of the money. You always want to be in control. So those are just the two ways to kind of structure these things and bid them out. We have site prep. There's always, cleaning, demolition. If you're going to get things like dumpsters, how are you going to do that? You have to think about the cost of some of these things. Sometimes it's cheaper to hire a guy with a truck, with a box truck, and just load it up with trash and have them drive it straight off site, especially if you're doing things like you're trying to do a rehab without a ton of permits. So if you're trying to run a rehab without permits, you can't have a dumpster outside. Inspector's going to drive by, he's going to see a big dumpster outside. Whose dumpster is that? You're going to come look at your property, pop you for not having permits. So you don't want to do free advertising for inspectors to come shut you down. So you would want to have more of a ninja crew. Have a guy come through with a truck, load up the truck, have everything bagged and tagged, load up the truck when it's here, truck gets out. Now the inspector has to catch you in the act, essentially. So there's some strategy to this, but it also factors into the cost, because the cost of the dumpsters might be $600 per dumpster. It pretty much is. And the cost to dump a ton of, like a literal, in terms of measurement, a ton of trash is like $90 a ton to $110 a ton on average. So you can start to factor this in. How many dumps is it going to take? How many trips is it going to take? How much I have to pay the driver? How much is the gas? And you can start to factor in which strategy is going to be cheaper, depending on what you're doing. But you're factoring in things like demo, jacking up the site, shoring up walls, especially in these full gut jobs where the walls are falling down. So you're factoring that. You're factoring in the foundation. Are you going to redo the crawl space, the foundation? Are you going to dig out a new basement? Are you going to dig down the basement and underpin it to get like 8 feet of ceiling height in the basement so you can finish it and have a comfortable space down there? All these things you're kind of factoring in. Your masonry. You have to do a lot of masonry to some of these older properties. Masonry is not the most expensive thing. I would say it's one of the most passed over things I've seen in a lot of these row home cities, a lot of these older properties. The brickwork is like failing. So when you go into these basements, you'll see like old sandstone and just sand on the floor. Like the mortar has essentially rotted out of the walls. You have to go in and do heavy masonry on those basements. That's how you protect your foundation. A crack, if you have like a crack in your brick at the top of the property, no big deal, because there's no weight on it. If it's at the bottom of your property and your foundation at your basement level, big deal, because all the weight of the property's on it. So you want to go in and make sure you're shoring up your property and factoring that in. It's not costly. The cost of mason mix is not expensive, and masons aren't expensive. There's a lot of $150 a day masons out there that can crank. that can tighten up your foundation. So then you're just talking about, another byproduct of this budget building, which is timelines. This is why it's so difficult to build budgets, is because you have to understand more than just the cost of the materials and the price per square foot, hypothetically. That will save you, but you need to understand timelines when you're trying to see how much a contractor is making. In order to understand how much they make, I need to know how long these things take. So how long does it take for you to TLC the basement and touch up all the walls? Is that a 2-day project? How many guys? 2 or 3 guys? 2 skilled guys and a helper? You have to understand some of these things at least a rudimentary level, so that you can build a proper budget, and or just see if you're dealing with a bid out situation, is that a good bid? Is that a decent number? Because if you can see that, then you could just run on bids, pass off the risk, know that the numbers are decent, and run with it. But if you don't know that the number's good, you're always at risk of a guy coming in with an unrealistic number. You're not as at risk of a guy coming in with a high ball number, because even if they do, they can still get the work done. And there is a value, which you'll learn if you're in real estate long enough. You'll learn that there's a value in just having the project done. Because if you have the project done, even if you overpaid for it, these assets will appreciate. And if the work is good and sturdy, these assets will appreciate in long term. It'll offset any overspend. But what you don't want is a non-spend, essentially, where you gave somebody 50 grand and they didn't get any work done. You'd rather overpay them and have the work done than pay them and have no work done. Because that's the real nightmare situation. Because now you then have to pay double for average work. You'd rather just pay more for good work and less stress. So being able to understand those timelines, those time frames, that's what's going to allow you to have better X-ray vision and be able to see into the project. Guys, drop your questions in the chat, in the comment section. Like, comment, subscribe. If you get value, like, comment, subscribe. There's a lot of free game here, quite frankly. Some of you guys should definitely watch this over again if you're working on a project. But you got to factor in all your masonry. Your masons are working on the total project. So they're doing the basement, the walls, the floor, concrete floor. That's going to keep the water out and keep the property watertight, because a lot of the water is running in through the property. So it's raining and that water is pooling up on the property. Then it gets down in the soil and finds its way into any cracks in the basement foundation. So, and even if you have the crawl space, that water, that water's getting there. You need to tighten your irrigation. You need to put in some French drains and really make sure your downspout and all of your gutter work is tight and flowing away from the property. Like, your job as a landlord is to keep water off your property, or it's going to rot your property out. But your masons doing that, they're doing your sidewalks, your patios, your chimney. They're kind of all over your house, and they're filling in the gaps. You have your earthwork, your foundation. This is kind of factoring a lot of stuff, but your retaining walls, your sod, if you're gonna redo the grass in the backyard, and just factor in some of this stuff. So you have all of that. Your water and sewer. What are you doing to this property? Are you tapping into a new main drain? Are you tapping into the water lines? Are you putting a sprinkler system in the property? And what's that going to cost? And are you going to have to tap into the main line? You have your rough framing and your full framing process, which I would say to frame out your typical property only takes about 10 days. It goes really fast. You put a crew in there, they'll bang through it in 10 days, and lumber doesn't cost that much. Framing is not that expensive. You actually end up spending, believe it or not, more money on demolition and structural repairs, redoing the window lintels, fixing the bricks, fixing any structural issues, and then some of your mechanic lines, your rough ends. Then you do on things like framing out the house. Roofing can be cheap with an in-house crew. Your typical roof in-house is going to be like $5 or $6 grand. It's not going to be that much, even for a big roof. So you're spending a lot of money on demolition and structural reframing, putting new subfloors down, new plywood throughout, leveling the property out, fixing the joists. All of that stuff takes time. We had a question come in. Let me tap into this. What are some of the shortcuts rehabbers take when doing construction that come back to bite them later? This is a good question. I would say there's a lot of shortcuts that it's not that the rehabbers are taking them, because a rehabber wants to save money but not necessarily take a shortcut. So a rehabber just wants to get it done cheap. A contractor will take a shortcut. So you'll see things like the framer will go in and frame the house. As you like really start getting into this, they'll go in and frame the whole house out, and then the plumber will come in and say, well, there's an easier way for me to run my plumbing stack, and it's to cut this joist in half. So they'll just get out their saw and just cut through a joist, and they'll destroy the structural integrity of the joist. And things like that come back to bite the property owner, because then the flooring's starting to fail because the joist isn't supported. So the joist cracks, and then the floor's sinking in, cutting some of those corners. Sometimes rehabbers will cut corners on being watertight. So the roofing, the exterior masonry. I've seen, and I've done things like this too. So I'm guilty of this stuff too. Sometimes when you first start, you think you can just paint over anything. Like you're just like, oh, I'll just slap some paint over it, it'll be fine. So you go into a property, there's wall panel, you just slap some paint over that thing. There's old trim, old door moldings. They're already caked over with paint, and you just paint over them again. And doing stuff like that cuts a lot of corners, because over the course of time, one, some of these items have lead in them. So you're always going to fail kind of these lead inspections and constantly have to keep paying money for lead recertifications, which we did a whole session on lead. So just go watch that session. But that's a big corner cut. I would say structural integrity is the ultimate corner cut. If you go into a property and it's leaning or doing something that's outside of the norm, believe it or not, there is normal settlement of a property. This does happen. So it's like, hey, this property's 100 years old. The floors aren't going to be perfectly square and level like a new construction deal. It's just not. And even that new construction deal 100 years from now, it's going to have some natural settlement, which is the soil underneath the foundation is washing away, because the water just keeps finding its way down into different channels. And as it's going down, it's washing away sediment. Some of these cities, like places like Philly, some of these neighborhoods were built on top of like old creeks, essentially. So deep beneath the surface, there's like running water. And over the course of time, the house can literally sink in certain areas and shift. But outside of that natural type of settlement, if you go in and there's clear joist issues or termite issues or some things and you don't address it, it's going to bite you. If there are ventilation issues or roofing issues, it's going to bite you. If you go in and there are things like cast iron plumbing, it's going to crack. Some of these things you need to just replace, which is why full gut renovations can be much better than cosmetic renovations to a degree. I'll typically do a cosmetic renovation with a plan of further down the line, as the neighborhood turns, as things improve, I'll either do a heavier renovation, add more beds and bathrooms, or convert it to multifamily, or I'll just do a heavy renovation and flip it and try to get some more money out of this thing. But there are so many corners that you can cut. Here's some corner cuts that don't really cost you anything. Not pulling permits. Not that I recommend it, but not pulling permits can save you a lot of money, because you can run a lot faster. Like, there's a reason why people do it. You can run a lot faster through a project. There's less checks and balances, and that speed allows you to get in and out of the deal faster. Carrying costs are way lower. So sometimes people will bang without permits, and that's a corner cut, because you could get caught and then pay like a double permit fee and get fined. But the pro can outweigh the con, because if you don't, you will only get caught typically in terms of a ratio on about, I would say about 1 out of 8 projects if you don't pull permits, like, by nature. If you scale up too much, though, if you're doing 20 deals, you'll start getting popped on multiple, because inspectors can literally just follow your guys from one project to another. They'll kind of see them, and you'll get a bad reputation for it. But outside of that, not pulling permits can be a corner cut that doesn't hurt you. But there are some of these corner cuts that do hurt you. And I would say it's mostly on structural. Things like electric as well. If you go in a house and there's electric in the baseboards, literally like an outlet in the baseboards, and there's old knob and tube wiring, sometimes people will let that go. This is how most house fires happen. Old electric that's spliced together with old electric tape that kind of gives way. And then you have loose wires in your ceiling right next to the insulation, which is flammable. And it's just like, that's all it takes. You turn on a light switch, shorts out, sparks a fire, and the house is lit. You know? So some of those corner cuts, plumbing, cast iron plumbing, rip it out, put in new plumbing. The wiring, rip it out, put in new wiring. The heat system, some of these heat systems last forever, so just keep it well maintained. The roofing, you can't skimp out on the roof. Whenever you get a property, you want to make sure the roof is tight. Make sure your windows are capped. This is a corner cut that hurts you, not capping your windows. If you guys go outside, look at your windows, you should see like some trim around your windows on the exterior, and there's some capping, which is supposed to keep the water out. If you don't do that, it's going to rot out the lumber around your window frame, and water is going to start penetrating that wall, and it's going to wash out the brick mortar from the wall. Then the brick's going to start to separate from the wall and bow out, and then you have more problems and more problems. So it's all around water. Water is the enemy of a property. So you have to view it that way. You have to keep it out of your property. Keep your foundation tight. And if you do that, the interior is usually fine. So it is not a corner cut to paint the old cabinets and all. That's not going to hurt you. It's not going to do anything. It might just block you from a higher ARV or a different quality tenant. But it's not a corner cut that's going to hurt you. But think about your mechanic lines. Think about the structural integrity of the property. That could hurt you long term, especially if you're going to hold it long term, which is why I like, for my long term holds, I like these full gut jobs. I want to go in and get it right. Sergeant King, is there a way you can partner with a builder and split the profits? Yeah, I mean, I've heard of a lot of people who want to do things like this. They're like, hey, I want to partner with a builder, and you build it at the rock bottom cost, no markups, and we'll split the profits. It's just hard to find. It's really hard to find, and you're better off just going and doing your own deal. You're better off just focusing on finding more profitable deals than trying to set up some of these arrangements. It's just difficult. I mean, you just really want a good builder, a good lender. Sometimes the partners are cheaper. Like sometimes you look at hard money or the bank, and it's like the bank is the cheapest money you can get at times. There's some lenders out there, especially community lenders, they'll lend you money for 7-8% on a construction loan. Just take the money. Find a good contractor, find a cheap enough property where you can hire a good contractor and get the work done and produce a profit, and just focus more on acquisitions. But structuring those partner relationships can be extremely difficult because they're different skill sets. Contractors or builders can have different skill sets than investors or developers. So it's different. But if you mean just like partner with somebody who's building houses, I mean, there might be opportunities like that, but none of them are going to be like, I would say, boilerplate. You're dealing with different relationships. Oh, the wrinkle is you own the land. Yeah, I mean, if you own the land, even still, just hire a contractor. If you already own the land, you can bring that land to a hard money company and say, hey, I already own the land. So can I use the land as my equity in the deal? So I don't have to bring any cash to the table. And they're like, yeah. So the land itself has value. So now you can just bring your land. They'll finance the whole build as long as the ARV is much larger than the build cost. Then you get a qualified builder and you build. You don't need the partner. A lot of us view the partnership as a shortcut. That's actually on the top of my list of things that'll burn you. It's just like a partner. A partner can burn you because they're taking half of the profits, and at some point you're capable by yourself of doing 100% of the work. You're pretty much capable now. Everybody here, you might not have the knowledge yet, but you can tap into the knowledge through mentorship. Hence the 100 Keys Masterclass, the VIP mentorship program, or the Boots on the Ground program, or a ride along. You can go out and get the knowledge and then execute. And it's much cheaper than 50% of your profits. Some of you are thinking like this. Let's say there's a mentorship program that costs, let's put a nice ticket on it. Let's say there's a mentorship program that costs $20K. Like $20K, you're going to learn everything about real estate. People are like, I'm not paying that. But then they'll go out and partner with somebody on a deal, and just a partner. And this is typically somebody also who doesn't know much. And they're going to go out and try to do like an 80K flip and split that in half. So you're paying them 40K. They don't even know anything. Versus paying 20K to get the knowledge to go out and make the 80 and then make it again and again and again and again for the rest of your life. So it's all about how you look at it. So I would say the partnership is a corner cut that bites you in the end, because now not only are they in for 50% of that 80,000 flip, and they're not necessarily giving you oversized value, but then they're on the next deal and the next deal and the next deal and the next deal. So if you did 10 deals and they're on 40K each 10, that's 400,000 that you could have made. And you really didn't need them because they're not providing that much knowledge. They're not providing resources and access. So that's a corner cut that can hurt you. It's not a budget related one, but it to a degree it is, because profit is budget. Profit is budget. So walk the path alone, build the muscle, and long term you can recover. That's the one message you guys must understand about real estate. The one thing you must understand is it's a big game and it can cover mistakes. It can cover mistakes. You can make $100,000 mistake and cover in real estate. You might not cover, you might be down deal one. Oh, I'm down 50 grand. Then you get to deal five. Deal five was up 150, covered the 50 and left you with 100. Deals 2 through 4 were like 40K deals, but you're going to hit a big one. And as you keep going, you're going to dwarf all your losses. Your losses will become laughable. You'll be like, man, why was I tripping over that? So you have to stick with real estate so that you can kind of see that. Scorpion Bradford, ain't no other channels dropping this knowledge. This is why I'm a subscriber. If you're not a subscriber, like now and subscribe. Guys, like, comment, subscribe. Share the video with somebody who can get some value. Because no, there's no knowledge on YouTube University that is real like this. Not for the real estate stuff, not for the renovation stuff. It's just not coming out. So definitely share this with somebody, but like, comment, subscribe. Like, comment, subscribe, and tap into the VIP mentorship program when you're ready. Don't take the shortcuts of partnership and all these things thinking you're going to outsmart the game. You're not. The partnership is just somebody else to suffer with. Somebody else who doesn't necessarily know enough. And you think it's safer, but you're exposed. And you don't really know somebody until you lose with somebody and see how they react to losses. Or sometimes you got to win with somebody and then see how they react when they're up. Some people change when they're up. Some people change when they're down. Very few people stay consistent. Very few. So somebody might be cool in the trenches when they're losing, or when things are smooth. But then when the money starts coming in, they start counting your money. They're like, oh, and you're like, well, where was all that at when we had 40 grand and we were just starting? And you get big numbers. Now they're somebody different. They got an inflated ego. Now you're dealing with that more than the real estate. So you got to watch the partnership stuff. You got to watch it. You got to watch it. To me, a partner is almost like that. It's essentially the same thing as getting married. You have to vet somebody at that level. A lot of you guys are gun shy on the marriage. You get cold feet. Some of you guys got 10-year engagements, 15-year, girlfriends, boyfriends. And it's like, but you're ready to hop into partnership because you don't understand that is a marriage. That's a marriage. You're locked into deals and mortgages with people. So you have to view it correctly. Not that you can't get like a ton of knowledge and stuff from it, but you just have to view this stuff correctly. But like, comment, subscribe. Share this with somebody who can get value. Pass on value. Sharing value is the best way to receive more value. It's by giving it out, passing it around. And more can come back to you. Somebody will hit you with a video. Put you onto some game. So I'm in Atlanta. Most houses are $250K and up. See, I've been talking to a lot of people in the Georgia market in general, which would include, parts of Atlanta or the general outskirts. There's a big room rental market out there. Getting big townhomes and renting rooms is very profitable there. There's a lot of traveling nurses there looking for that type of product as well. So you have to start thinking outside of the box. Not necessarily looking at kind of the prices of the houses and their current setup, but how could you reconfigure the current setup or rent it for a premium to the point where now you can start acquiring some of these houses and some of these assets and making more sense out of them than the average bear. Because you only have to be 1% smarter. You don't have to be 100% better than somebody, just 1% better, 1% faster, 1% smarter, and have 1% more vision. And you can make 100% more money than them on the same deal. It's all about critical mass. Once you learn 51% of what you need to know in real estate, the rest will just unfold. You barely even need to learn it. You're going to learn it because if you keep moving forward, it's just going to be revealed. Because you'll have so much knowledge to draw on that you can truly figure out the rest. You're not going to figure out you can figure out 51% from the School of Hard Knocks, but it's going to cost you $1 million. It's going to cost you $1 million to go out and really get burned at that level. And that's what it is. Getting burned, overpaying lenders, overpaying contractors, overpaying suppliers, overpaying for deals, building them wrong, cutting the wrong corners, renting to the wrong tenants, hiring the wrong professionals. It's just an unforgiving game. This is that one game where you better have mentorship because the losses can be massive. You're better off going and not knowing anything about trading and just throwing your money in the stock market, hoping for the best, than you are just throwing it into real estate and hoping for the best. Because real estate is just a different beast. It's just a different beast. It's a super beast. I'm gonna push us through this. If you guys have any more questions, comments, concerns, drop them. You want to focus on your exterior work. We talked a ton about exterior and buttoning up. Windows, $250 per window, $300 per window. It's a number that'll keep you safe if you need to replace them. Count your windows, multiply, keep running. Your plumbing costs, this all depends on what you're doing. If you're just going in and swapping out shower heads and faucets, it costs barely anything. If you're going to go in and swap out the internal plumbing lines of a property, it's going to cost you $5,000 to $8,000 to knock it out on your typical starter home. Electric, once again, 5 to 8,000. Not that you can't get guys cheaper to do it. So you are going to find some guys who are like, I can get the electric. I had a guy one time. He's like, I'm gonna wire the whole house for $1,800. I told him no. I told him get out. I was like, that's crazy. There's no way you can do that. He was like, materials included. Well, if he stole the materials, which he probably was doing off another job site, you know, it's just crazy. It's just crazy. Somebody said, will this webinar be available on your channel for review? I'm not sure what you mean. I mean, it's on the channel. It'll be in the live section. If you tap into the YouTube channel, subscribe, tap into the live section, you'll see it. Once we wrap this thing up, you'll definitely see it. And you'll see a whole lot more game. I mean, if some of you guys would just watch the lives, I mean, you would your mind would be blown. Yeah, if anybody's in the VIP program and wants to tap into this spreadsheet that we're going through now, just DM me, text me, whatever, and I'll send it. Just reach out. What else we got here? Electrical. You can kind of go through this. Some of this is built out. This is for a 4-unit that I'm looking at right now. Insulation, air sealing, drywall. A good drywall number is like $20 per sheet. So typically a sheet of drywall is 4x8, and you will pay your crews to hang and tape. So you're usually paying them. I know people are paying like $12 to hang, $12 to tape and finish. You go into a big property, maybe it's 250 sheets, and it's just a multiplication game. And they're going to send in a crew of 8 guys, and they're going to hang it all in a day, come back, tape it, spackle it, let it dry, come back, sand it, touch it up, let it dry, come back, smooth it out again, and then it's ready for paint. Usually about a week to sheetrock your house. But that's some big picture numbers. Interior finishing, your flooring, your cabinets, your backsplashes, your countertops, just finishing this property. By the time you get to, what most people don't understand is by the time you get to interior finishing, it's like the least of your concerns. Unless you're super hype about like interior design, I mean, it becomes plug and play. I've got some good crews where I'm just like, finish it. Get out of their way, let them finish it. Product is amazing. And it flies. It's one of the fastest times because you can see everything. But most of what you see, even at, I look around like the office, most of what you see is like the very end of the project. Like 30% of the time is spent only finishing. 70% of the work is behind the sheetrock. You can't see it. All the structure, all the demo, all the reformatting, the framing, the plumbing, the electric, sprinkler systems, insulation, fire seal, all of this stuff is behind those walls. By the time you finish, it's just like plug and play. It's going really fast. I just got a text. Pete said, give me that budget. I'll send it over once we wrap up this call. Yeah, anybody wants it, just shoot me a text and I'll send it over. Porches, decks. Don't forget about some of these things, like the backyard work, the porch work. If you have trees that are too close to your foundation, do you have in-house guys who can cut that tree down? Or do you have to call an arborist? And how much are they going to charge? They're going to charge you, I will factor in $1,000 a tree easy. But you don't need to cut every tree at a property. Only the ones that are really close to the foundation. Only the ones that are, within five to, I'll call it like 7 feet to the foundation. Because those roots, they're going to grow into your basement. They're going to grow right through your basement wall. If you've ever gone into a property and you go in the basement and the floor is all jacked up and like lumpy, you're like, why is the basement like there's a little lump here? That's a root. That's a tree root that is growing under the property and pushing up the concrete in the basement. So these roots They break through, and then the water follows the path of the root and starts to rot away the foundation, create structural issues. So you got to get those trees off your foundation line before they cause a problem. That's mandatory. That's a corner cut that will cost you. We should do a whole session called corner cuts that will cost you. I'll write down like 20 of them. Maybe I'll make a quick YouTube video on that. Corner cuts that'll cost you. Utilities, your HVAC, your appliances. One thing on utilities that I don't want to gloss over, as you're doing some of these rehab projects, you're going to run into issues with your utilities. Like I'm dealing with a property right now, and at some point somebody just they cut the gas off and took the meter. So the property has everything but the gas meter, and we want to get the gas meter put back on because the radiators are still in the property and they're functional, and radiator heat is better. Like it really makes no sense. They must have, it does make sense now. They must have owed the gas company money, and the gas company just came in and was like, until you pay us, like, your service is off and we're disconnecting you. Something had to happen here, but they put in like electric baseboard heat, which is way more expensive than radiator heat, way less preferable. So we're going to get it reinstalled. But this is something that I knew we were going to do from day one, because as more of a seasoned investor, I'm looking at these things in the inspection videos. I'm looking, is the water meter installed? Is the electric meter there? Is the gas meter there? If they're not there, you know you have to order them, and you have to understand what you're getting into. The gas meter I was less concerned with. Electric meters have been a nightmare lately because there's a shortage nationally of electric materials, especially for multifamily properties. So there's a shortage. There's a shortage to the point where the city of Philadelphia on one of my properties stole my meter. Like they literally are driving around and they're like, oh, if your electric hasn't been on for a year. Like I had a basement apartment that I just had like just sitting for like a year. They just drive around and just take your meter. Your service wasn't active for a year, so we just took your meter. What you mean? You stole my meter? Yeah, you got to order a new one. It's going to take 2 months. You're like, whoa. So there's shortages, and it can lead to different issues, but you need to understand those things so you know what you're getting into. Water meter you can get in a week or two. It's nothing. They're going to come and slap. They actually want to come in and put the smart meters in your properties. In a lot of big cities, they want to put smart meters in anyway. So it's easy to get, but it's harder to get some of the old school, especially electric stuff. You can't even go to the supply shops and get it. Telling partnerships can work, but when you start out slow, they slow you down in the long run. So they can help you when you start, but when you slow down, they'll slow you down in the long run. What's that? So you got to weigh the pros and cons. It's not even, I won't even say that a partnership will slow you down, but it's going to cost you money in the long run. It can slow you down in the form of arguing with somebody, or like having to convince someone else that you should go in a certain direction with the real estate, versus having the freedom to go in the direction that you see and just focusing on the assets, just focusing on execution. So there's so much to deal with in real estate that the last thing you want to deal with is another person and their objective, because you have to be super aligned, and most people aren't, not across the board. One, naturally in a partnership, one person's going to be more aggressive than the other. One person might be more focused on operations than the other. One person might have this skill set, the other has this skill set, and they're useful in different places. But that doesn't mean that people have the self-awareness to see that. So somebody might be like, oh, well, I have the best ideas and this is the way to go. And you're like, no, that doesn't work here for XYZ. And then you're battling somebody. You're having discussions, conversations about a path, when all that's not necessary when you're the boss by yourself. Because then it's just your way to highway. And that's how it should be. The other thing is, I'm doing this to build more, why do I do these lives? Why do I give you this education? I'm doing this so more of you can break free from the 9 to 5 And as part of that, be your own boss. Bet on you. Go all in on yourself. Don't be afraid to fail yourself. Don't be afraid to fail. Take this thing to the mat. Go out and go hard on this thing. File bankruptcy, come back. If it takes that, whatever it takes to be successful. But you get into real estate to be your own boss, not to deal with another boss. And when you have a partner, it's not that they're your boss, but they are another boss. So now you're dealing with another attitude, another boss-like attitude. Just be your own boss. Call your own shots, bet on yourself, and you will thank yourself long term. But get knowledge elsewhere. A lot of people do the partnership thinking there's knowledge in it or there's safety in it, and there's not. There's really not. Not at all. And not what you think it is. There's more knowledge and safety and mentorship than partnership. Way more, actually. There's not even a comparison. Yeah, there's no comparison. And the more you learn that, the more you'll just bet on yourself and your own education. Even me to this day, it's not necessarily in real estate, but in other things. If I want to learn something else, I have no problem with tapping into a program and just hitting that fast button. Let me tap in. This guy knows what he's talking about. This guy's, done 50 million over here doing XYZ in marketing. Let me tap in that. Let me see what he's talking about. Let me see if that program's about. So you have to invest in yourself every year. This investment is a tax write-off. You have to invest in knowledge. You have to push yourself. The worst thing that can happen is you lose a little bit of money tapping into a program that maybe was lousy. That's how I look at it. Like, oh, I tap into that marketing course. Maybe it's bad. You lose a little bit of money. But here's the thing. I could tap in. Let's say if I want to learn about marketing, I want to learn about, let's say, TikTok ads, because I want to test something out. So I can go tap into a course on TikTok ads. Or I can say, I don't need that course. I'm a boss. I'm going to figure this thing out from the School of Hard Knocks. So I start running the campaign, and I don't know what I'm doing. Before you know it, I burned through $3-4 grand in ad spend with no results, no yield, because I didn't want to drop $500 on a program. You pay either way. If you're really going to do this stuff, you're going to pay. You really are. Like, if you're going to go out and invest in real estate, you're going to pay for your own education, whether that's School of Hard Knocks payment or not. So you just have to factor in, the value to you, the best return on investment. As my guy Morris says, the best return on investment is mentorship. He's already seen it and getting a deal in, 30 days or 60 days. It's getting your first deal, and you can see those results. Then we have appliances, and that's like the total. So you want to total your stuff up. You want to see the difference between your actual spend and what you budgeted. And budgeting is a backwards looking process, guys. So you want to build your budgets, and you want to track your money, track your spending, take it seriously, and then look backwards. So do a deal, and now you have all the data to do the next deal if you tracked it, right? So you want to set it up in a way where you can track the numbers and you can kind of see what's going on. There's a value in that. Even if it costs you more to a degree to do that, to manage a project by the day, having the visibility is a value. It's a long-term value, having the visibility in the costs of the actual construction. So it gives you a different level of value. Everything is a value. It's just a question of, are you going to stick around long enough to cash in on the value? Or are you going to quit or get impressed by the next shiny thing, the next thing that's out there? So hopefully this helped, guys. Brian Grimes, your real estate mentor, signing off. Like, comment, subscribe, share this video with somebody, and I'll see you guys on the next one.